Welcome back to the Bible in 10 minutes. And today we are going to begin the first section of the Bible entitled The Law. The Law is the first 5 books of the Bible. So, first, let's give our sins. Though man sinned against his creator, so man was put into a sinless environment, a sinless world. God gave them a command. They sinned against God their creator. But what does God do? Well, God, rather than destroying them, made a covenant with them. What is a covenant? It's an agreement between two parties, between two people. Now, God has a part of the covenant that he must uphold, and we have a part of the covenant we must uphold. And our part is to perfectly obey him. But you and I fail, and every man fails. We sin against God. So God should destroy us. But what does he do? No, it's he made provision that he might fulfill his promises to them, because you and I, we fail to perfectly obey God. God made provision. God gave sacrifice for the forgiveness of sins. So let me read that again. Though man sinned against his creator, God, rather than destroying him, made a covenant with them and made provision that he might fulfill his promises to them. So quickly, let's run through the law. So, as I said, the law is the first 5 books of the Bible. We have Genesis. So, first in Genesis, we have the creation, where God created all things, put man in the garden, and commissioned him and the woman to multiply and subdue the world. Then we have the fall, where man sinned against God and brought sin into the world and God's curse on all of creation. Then we have the flood, where God cleansed the world by a worldwide flood, saving Noah and his family. Then we have the spread, where man refused to spread out over the earth. So God confused their languages, forcing them to. And finally, we have the fathers. And this is the story of how God carries out his promise to Abraham through his descendants. Then we come to the book of Exodus. First, we have the bondage. Now, why are God's people in bondage now? Well, at the end of Genesis, we have this situation. I don't have time to go through it, but this situation where one of the brothers goes to Egypt. The rest of the family ends up coming because there's a famine. There's no food. They need food in Egypt, and now they go to Egypt and they end up in bondage. So listen, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, driven by fear of the growth of Israel, makes them his slave. Then we have the deliverance. Well, God sends Moses back to deliver them by 10 plagues. Then we have the covenant. God gives his people the 10 commandments and various other laws, instructing them how to live as a people in covenant with him. Then we have the tabernacle, where God made provision whenever they broke his covenant, namely by animal sacrifices. And that's the provision for the forgiveness of their sins. Then we come to Leviticus, where we have the sacrifices worked out more. And the sacrifices are prescriptions for how the people were to worship God. Then we have the priesthood, where God appointed men to mediate between sinful man and a holy God. Then we have the problem. Listen, even the priests failed to obey God, because the problem for them and for all people was an eternal one coming to all mankind. And that internal problem is sin. Then we have the atonement, God's provision for national forgiveness of sins every year. Then we have the commandments, where God detailed how they are to live as a people set apart for himself. Then we come to the book of Numbers, where we have the census, where God has his people number the army to prepare to conquer the land he promised to them. Then we have the duties, where God details the duties of everyone in the camp. Then we have the journey. Because the people did not obey God to go in and conquer the promised land, they had to wander in the wilderness 40 years. And finally, we come to Deuteronomy, which literally means second law. So after the 40 years of wandering, God has Moses come give them another law before they go into the land. So in Deuteronomy, we have the history where Moses gives a history of their journey and reveals the law. Then the summation, where Moses gives the heart of the law, which is love. We have the law, where Moses reviews and gives additional laws as they prepare to enter the promised land. And finally, the transition. Because of Moses' disobedience, Joshua, his former assistant, is made the new leader of God's people. Now, most importantly, how does this section point us to Jesus Christ? Well, first of all, Genesis. Genesis looks forward to the promised seed that will crush Satan's head and bless the world. Listen, after Adam and Eve sinned against God, he didn't destroy them, but he made a promise that from the descendant of the woman, the seed of the woman, one would come and he would crush Satan's head. Now, Satan would crush his heel, but he would crush Satan's head, and that was Jesus Christ. He came into this world from heaven. And when he went to the cross, Satan crushed his heel and he died. But he crushed Satan's head in his death. And also, he's going to bless the world. There was a promise made to Abraham, in your seed, all the nations will be blessed. And that seed, that descendant, was the Lord Jesus Christ, the book of Exodus. It looks forward to the greater Moses who will bring about a greater deliverance. See, God sent a man, Moses, to deliver the people from a physical bondage in Egypt and lead them to the promised land. But Jesus Christ is the man, the God man that came from heaven to deliver us from a greater bondage, our bondage to sin, our bondage to Satan. And Jesus Christ didn't do it by 10 plagues. Jesus Christ did it by laying down his life and shedding his blood. And he is leading his people to the new heavens and new earth, the ultimate promised land. What about Leviticus? Leviticus looks forward to the greater priest who will not fail and the greater sacrifice he would offer. See, the priests in the book of Leviticus, they failed. They were sinners. They had to offer sacrifices for themselves. They failed to keep the covenant. But the sacrifice they offered were animals. There was some temporary forgiveness God granted, but they had to do it again and again and again. We need a better sacrifice that could be offered once and for all. We need a better priest who can mediate or stand between us and God on our behalf that doesn't sin. And that was the Lord Jesus Christ. What about Numbers? Numbers looks forward to the greater serpent to be raised up for our salvation. What am I talking about? Well, in Numbers 21, we have this interesting story. The people of God, they're complaining against God. So God sends poisonous snakes to bite them, and many are dying. But God in his mercy tells Moses to raise up a bronze serpent, a bronze snake, and everyone who looks upon it will be healed. And Jesus says this is pointing to himself in John chapter 3, where it says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man, so Jesus Christ must be lifted up, that everyone who believes in him will be saved. Do you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ? Do you believe not in just the facts of what he did, but you believe what he did and who he is? He is Lord, and what he says, that you must deny yourself to follow him. Have you done that? I hope you have. And finally, we have Deuteronomy, which looks forward to the greater one who will keep the law for our blessing. There's an interesting verse at the end of Deuteronomy 27. It says, cursed is everyone who does not keep all the words of the law perfectly. So that's a problem for you. That's a problem for me. We can't keep the law perfectly. Remember, God has a covenant. He upholds his side, but we fail to uphold our side. But it says, cursed is everyone who fails even at one point. So we have a problem. But God demands perfect obedience. So someone has to do it. And that's the Lord Jesus Christ. He sent Jesus Christ into this world. And as a man, the God man, but as a man, he perfectly obeyed God. So he can gain the righteous standing for God for you and for me. And then he went to the cross. And for your and my past, present, and future sins that deserve the curse, he took the curse on himself and he was crushed and he shed his blood. But he rose again. And his righteousness he gained, he clothes his people, and they actually become the righteousness of God. They actually become the righteousness of Jesus Christ that he earned for them. But that only comes, as I said in my last point, when you believe in him. When you believe what he has done, who he is and what he has said, and you bow to him as Lord. I hope you have done that. So that is the law, the first 5 books of the Bible, and it all points to Jesus Christ.